Volume 4 takes a deep and profound look at the great visionaries, where they were right, where they recognized how consciousness relates to, indeed manifests reality, and where they were wrong. Siddhartha Gautama made great strides in his ancient Hindu world, better clarifying life to become revered as the Buddha. Part 8 of Volume 4 pinpoints his great insights, where he was right. The Essence of Reality explores how the psyche which you are creates the reality you encounter. So you've arrived, you found the essence of reality with unique insights into human consciousness, how life actually works. The reality you experience flows in a way that neither science nor religion can recognize. Here, you see just how you attract and thus create the real qualities of your life. No God or any other source dictates your health, success, relationships, only you, to gain awareness of that inner-outer connection and move your life in positive directions. Stay tuned and check out other episodes. We have loads and batches of things to cover. Volume 4 pieces shift here from a look at Jesus and his message, cornerstone elements of Western thinking, to another great and long-standing tradition from the East. Prime focus is Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddha, principally in this issue, number 48, what he got right in his teachings. Next issue will regard where Gautama missed the target, where he was wrong, or more accurately, fell short in describing how life works. But to regard either heads or tails of the coin, Gautama has to be placed in context. That visionary emerged from a Hindu background, changing and enhancing some traditional points to make his own. So it becomes necessary to illustrate Hindu thinking at the outset so that the Buddha's contribution can be clarified. And that small task becomes quickly bogged down in a plethora of esoteric terms that constitute Hindu practice. More than a religion, Hinduism is a way of life, a way, indeed, of living. Many of the terms that form Hindu thinking, and likewise gain different meaning in Buddhist practices, have no equivalent concept in English. Western religious roots and thinking simply differ, and differ considerably from the Eastern point of view. So it isn't just the terms that are exotic, but the ideas and worldview themselves. Add to the complexity the factor that Hindu notions and Buddhist derivatives may not, either of them, precisely reflect reality. So my purpose here is to illustrate both Hindu roots and Gautama's revision, plus perspectives on how accurately they treat consciousness and its engagement of reality. Dharma, for example, in Hindu terms might be understood as behaviors consistent with rata, the ordered flow of the universe. That is, with Dharma, your actions are in tune with the way things are going. But what a Hindu might consider rata to be may or may not be accurate in either reality or within the verbal description of it. In Buddhism, though, Dharma basically refers to what might be termed cosmic law, or the ultimate order of things. But again, does that law exist? Or is it deemed into existence by adherents to long-standing Buddhist traditions, woven into a pre-absorbed view of the world based on having accepted a Buddhist viewpoint? Compounding the complexity is a very wide range of specific practices in both Hindu and Buddhist movements, not at all unlike the diverse Christian religions. They all hold a basic viewpoint while differing on details and asserting that they alone are right. The only way to really proceed is to bypass the esoteric terms, prajna, anicca, dukkha, anatta, or anatman, and so forth, and stick, for the most part, to concepts. Words, traditions, concepts, and definitions don't mean nearly as much as an adequate illustration of meaning. So first, I'll look at the overall gist of how a generic Hindu might view reality, then examine what the Buddha held as true. First, in this episode, where he got it right, then in the next, what he missed. Tom Nair here. As ever, exploring consciousness. Perspectives here provide visual addition to my website, my books, and some 200 talks I've given to open-minded groups sincerely seeking to understand life. Through a mystic experience and a personal inner journey, I've come to see the oneness of things, an inner-outer connection of self with real events and relationships of daily life. Becoming aware of that connection, you can improve real life by finding and changing inner roots to outer problems. Siddhartha Gautama emerged from a noble family some 2,500 years ago. Stories have it that he was held from exposure to life's ills and even death until he happened to see both difficulties outside the palace. He embarked on a personal journey, so it said, in which he tried various paths to come to understand what life was all about, to see why life has its stages, most of which involve suffering. Rejecting the life of an ascetic, he almost starved to death, as well as that of a noble. He found a middle way. Following his journey while meditating, he became enlightened, so the story goes. But the traditions of India, from which he diverged, had and have many philosophical elements to their outlook that differ significantly from Western-based understanding. Ignoring thoughts of a supreme deity and a plethora of other Hindu gods and goddesses, these are worshipped and presented offerings, but aren't all that significant in the philosophical scheme of Hinduism. Let's look rather at the gist of Hindu traditional thinking. And I do mean traditional. It goes back well into prehistory, as Hinduism is the oldest of any continuous practice in the world. Generally, Hinduism regards life as a series of incarnations, experienced by a distinct self, called Atman if you're keeping score. This in a context of samsara, the cyclic nature of all life and matter. Actions you've taken in the past, even in past lives, carry negative consequences with them if they were damaging in nature. Even destructive intentions add the accumulation of negative karma, according to Hindu thinking. Thus, as they would see it, bad things you encounter in life now all harken back to those previous negatives. Of course, beneficial action and positive intent elicit good karma too, according to Hindu thinking. Hinduism, strangely, doesn't provide a set formula for eliminating the bad karma, so you don't keep running into echoes of your earlier bad intent and deeds. You can, it seems, sort of ignore it and let it all work out, or practice detachment. Don't let it get to you. Or be discriminating in selecting your actions. The thought there seems to be that maintaining focus on positive things will build up pluses in the karmic supply tank. In any case, self-knowledge and greater consciousness of the oneness of Supreme Soul are thought to break the cycle of rebirth. That's called moksha, liberation and release from the cycles of life that seem to always feature suffering. Again, moksha, as greater awareness, gets you out of the loop of suffering-infested incarnations. Before seeing how the Buddha revised some of this thinking, it's worthy to note valuable insights woven into this ancient view and lifestyle. Indeed, the self does reincarnate into this sort of meaning-based reality. Indeed, you do bring your complex set of deep underlying subconscious values, your essence, with you. And that will set up qualitatively the next incarnation. Consciousness is the basis. That doesn't disappear from existence. However, the process to human existence isn't just like Hinduism paints it. But that ancient practice is much closer to grasping the basis of existence as a conscious self than any Western religion, with typical unsupported conjecture of intrusive deities, post-death judgment, and other invented nonsense. Ideas about karma have some substance to them, but some distortion as well, which will be looked at in the next issue. It seems that Siddhartha Gautama noticed flaws in the Hindu approach of his day. He engaged, that is, experienced personally, various practices of his time meant to yield awareness of life's hidden function, and in the process break the cyclic samsara pattern of repeated birth, aging, and death. So wisely, Gautama tried things. He didn't just take the account of some guru or yogi, but actually sought out personal experience. No substitution for that. As I often emphasize here, don't just listen to me or Buddha or anybody, but explore your own mind and its interplay with real life. The Buddha attained that enlightened status by doing just that, a personal journey. Now, exactly what he experienced and or recommended to acolytes of his time isn't really known. Accounts of the Buddha's views and teachings date from long after his lifetime. Unlike with Jesus, though, his words weren't preserved, but they most likely did initiate the subsequent viewpoint and technique which Buddhists practice to this day. In any case, that message, as it formulated over time, that's what I'll be commenting on. In effect, Gautama, within the context of Hindu impressions, saw life as a continuum of suffering experienced over repeated incarnations. His Four Noble Truths clarify suffering and its cause, then propose a means to end that suffering, along with a trail of painful incarnations. The first Noble Truth emphasizes how life is plagued with suffering, pain at birth, through sickness and old age. Then you deteriorate into death and loss. Humans are subject to desire, but even when wishes are met, satisfaction is fleeting and craving resumes. That, according to the Buddha, renders life as frequented by suffering. In the second Noble Truth, the Buddha attributes the cause of suffering to desire itself, termed tanha in the scope of samudaya, their term for suffering. These can be further detailed as three roots of evil: greed and desire, number one; ignorance or delusion, the second; plus hatred and destructive urges as the third. Of course, desire can be seen in a positive sense as well. Desire for enlightenment itself, desire for positive outcomes for others, and such. But key to Buddha's approach is desire as the cause of suffering. That leads to the third Noble Truth, the cessation of suffering, nirodha, they call it. You don't have to remember that. I won't be quizzing you on it. Liberation from the ongoing cycle of suffering through life and repeated incarnation comes from ending suffering, reaching a state of nirvana by extinguishing the three great fires of delusion, greed, and hatred. Thus, attaining nirvana equates to reaching enlightenment and its state of peace. This nirvana status is roughly equivalent to the Hindu moksha. Attaining that state is laid out in the fourth Noble Truth, magga they call it, seen as the middle way between indulgence in pleasure and severe asceticism. That is accomplished by following the Noble Eightfold Path. We'll get deeper into the Eightfold Path, explore just how noble it is or isn't, in the next episode that shows the shortcomings of Buddha's approach as well as the traditions that grew from it. But in effect, the recommended path includes elements of wisdom, ethical conduct, and meditation. In the process, a right way of understanding, speaking, acting, thinking, and so forth are put forth as needing to be practiced. The gist is, conduct your life this way, including a significant meditation to embed these right ways of being into your nature. Doing that, you should reach some degree of enlightenment and remove the need for further incarnations wherein you have to slog through suffering. There's much to be said for Gautama's approach and insights it added to earlier thinking. One key element is his recognition that life is comprehensive and responsive to one's own inner state. He was absolutely right in that regard. The real set of events and relationships encountered is neither random, and thus meaningless, nor necessarily painful. There is a way out. In a fashion, along with this suggested process, the Buddha provides distinct techniques whereby seekers can improve things. Unlike Hindu root notions where you have merely vague thoughts about dissolving long accumulated karma, Gautama saw karma, a word meaning action, as a current status, not so much spread out back through lives unrecalled and currently unknown. For him, action could be taken to revise negative thinking, to be right mindfulness, damaging aims revised into right intention, incorrect ideas revised into right understanding, and so forth. Here the Buddha certainly moved the ancient Hindu ideas toward a clearer grasp of how things actually work. He noticed the impermanence of things, how life is always in a state of flux. This, by the way, parallels the thinking of approximate contemporaries Heraclitus in Greece and Lao Tzu in China. Nothing remains permanent and unchanging. An exceptional realization. He further commented on sacred scriptures in a profound way. Teachings should be taken on their value, not just blindly followed based on common or authoritative acceptance. That's brilliant. Now, the Buddha also revised the Hindu notion of an experiencing self, Atman, a set entity that worked its way through incarnations. He felt the self to be an illusion, in that it is always changing, always becoming something different. Thus, in his view, doesn't really exist. We'll look at this notion in the next episode. Another key enhancement Gautama made to traditional thinking was in terms of karma, where it had always been looked upon as a carryover of good and bad from previous lifetimes. The Buddha saw it more as a current state of things, what you are now. I find this interpretation to be much closer to reality. You'll note my extensive Volume 3 pieces and considerable time spent in my books and on my website detailing how to find and change inner roots to outer problems. Scouring your subconscious in a detailed, controlled fashion is much more exacting than anything found in Hinduism. Sure beats offering sacrifices to Lakshmi, for example. And it's much more effective than meditation, however good you get at it. But no matter what, your nature is fully defined by your comprehensive mindset right now. Certainly, you've lived a lifetime up until now, changing it, adding experience, learning lessons, and you brought your core nature into this incarnation with you. We've talked about that. So in a way, your composite nature is a carryover from previous states. It changes slightly as you pass through life, with or without your purposeful inner revision. So indeed, the concept of karma, particularly the Buddha's focus on your current state, is very useful and a clarifying insight. Gautama revised the notion of samsara too. That term, samsara, I had noted, is the Hindu word for the cyclic nature of all life and matter. Hindus expect that souls of people still attached to their negative karma will continue to reincarnate until they've worked off all the negatives. The Buddha had a more positive take on samsara. He imagined rebirths to be more like stages of growth, to be experienced en route to enlightenment. And there too, the Buddha revised the older moksha thought of Hinduism. It was regarded as being release of the Atman, the indestructible individual soul, from repeated cycle of incarnations once you've worked off your negative karma. For Gautama, though, liberation was termed nirvana. It would be an end to desire and craving, and it would end the cycle of reincarnation by ending the state of desire that drove the process. There are, though, some problems with Buddha's approach. Here we've enumerated the pluses, where Gautama was right. These are highly valuable and quite useful to grasp. But his noble four truths have some problems, evaluated in comparison to reality. And they carry down to the Noble Eightfold Path. For as much as the Buddha contributed to man's thinking, it would be a big plus to clarify where he was wrong. Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddha, emerged from a Hindu background, changing and enhancing some traditional points to make his own. First, I'll look at the overall gist of how a generic Hindu might view reality, then examine what the Buddha held as true. Hinduism regards life as a series of incarnations experienced by a distinct self called Atman. Actions you've taken in the past, even in past lives, carry negative consequences with them, karma. Siddhartha Gautama noticed flaws in the Hindu approach of his day. In effect, Gautama saw life as a continuum of suffering, experienced over repeated incarnations. His Four Noble Truths clarify suffering and its cause, then propose a means to end that suffering along with the trail of painful incarnations. The first Noble Truth emphasizes how life is plagued with suffering. The second Noble Truth attributes the cause of suffering to desire itself. The third Noble Truth, the cessation of suffering, reaching a state of nirvana by extinguishing the three great fires of delusion, greed, and hatred. The fourth Noble Truth is accomplished by following the Noble Eightfold Path. The gist is, conduct your life this way, including significant meditation to embed these right ways of being into your nature. One key element is his recognition that life is comprehensive and responsive to one's own inner state. The Buddha provides distinct techniques whereby seekers can improve things. Unlike Hindu root notions, Gautama saw karma as a current status, not so much spread out back through lives unrecalled and currently unknown. He noticed the impermanence of things, how life is always in a state of flux. He further commented on sacred scriptures in a profound way. Teachings should be taken on their value, not just blindly followed based on common or authoritative acceptance. Gautama revised the notion of samsara, the cyclic nature of all life and matter. Hindus expect that souls will continue to reincarnate until they've worked off all the negatives. The Buddha imagined rebirths to be more like stages of growth, to be experienced en route to enlightenment. Here we've enumerated the pluses, where Gautama was right, but his Noble Four Truths have some problems evaluated in comparison to reality. It would be a big plus to clarify where he was wrong.